project presentations. My name is Ava Elder, and I will be your Master of Ceremony. I ask that you first please take the time to turn off or silence your cell phones. I'm now going to introduce our teacher, Mr. Dylan Odner. We're going to start out the evening with a speech by David Klosterman about learning to backpack.
Senior project has always been a class that has interested me since freshman year. I thought to myself, hey, that class looks cool, but the speech at the end, I don't think so. But when the end of junior year came around and it was time to pick my class for senior year, I decided to take a risk and take senior project. Taking this class gave me the opportunity to pursue exploring the outdoors, a hobby of mine that I've always enjoyed but could never find the time for. Backpacking is a combination of hiking and camping, and you carry your gear and food on your back while you go out and see the amazing things this world has to offer. Once I got my mind set on backpacking, I knew I made the right decision. One major goal in senior project is discovering your why or purpose. Initially, my why was to dive into the outdoors and create a base platform, so I could build off of it and do more advanced things in the future. Before the start of senior project, I had pretty basic outdoor knowledge. I needed a mentor to teach me the skills and explain some important tips and tricks for spending nights alone in the wilderness. The search for my mentor started off slowly. I was sitting in my room the night before the mentor form was due, wondering, what am I gonna do? Who can help me do this? That's when it hit me that my hockey coach, Tony Griffin, would be the perfect man for the job. I reached out to Tony about possibly being my mentor, and he instantly said yes. The second thing he said was, so what's your project? When I told him that I wanted to learn to backpack, he became even more excited. With Tony by my side and an idea in my mind, we were able to form a plan and get to work. For my project, I planned a 2-day backpacking trip to prepare me for a bigger one down the road. I needed to accomplish 5 things. First, I needed to gather the necessary gear and supplies needed to survive in the wilderness for 2 days. The second thing was to find a location. Third thing, find a date. Fourth, practice using my gear so I would know how to use it. And finally, number 5, go out and enjoy myself for the weekend. The first step of gathering supplies and gear at first seemed like a large task. But with the help of Tony and my good friend Dan Jordan, I was able to get this done effectively. Tony has been involved in the outdoors for many years and has a large network of fellow outdoorsmen. He used that network to get the word out about my project and received a lot of feedback. I received a generous donation of $150 to the store REI, where I was able to purchase a rain jacket, butane stove, and a water filtration device. Tony also generously gave me an old tent. So here's some of the stuff that I was able to purchase from REI. First thing, this butane stove. This I used for cooking up water, purify it so you can drink it. Also, I used it for cooking up ramen for dinner. Tasted really good out there. And in the morning, used it for cooking up coffee. So what you do is screw this on, grab a match, light it, and you have fire to cook up some food, water, what you need. Second thing I purchased was this water filtration device. This was probably my favorite purchase because of how effective it is and how well it worked out there. So what you do is you just screw this off, fill it up with water, screw this back on, and you're good to go. Just kind of swish it around a little bit. And my favorite thing about this is that it has this handle, so you can hang it from a tree at your campsite if you're staying there for a couple days, or you can carry it by your side if you need drinking water, so you can just get a quick drink. And the third thing I got was this rain jacket. Use this almost every time it rains, works very well, and it's very lightweight, which is helpful and has a bunch of good pockets, because one thing I learned is that you can never have enough pockets. They're very useful when you're out there. With the help of Tony, I was able to get about half the things I needed. Luckily, my friend Dan Jordan, who also has a lot of backpacking gear, said I could borrow whatever I needed. Thanks to Tony and Dan, I was able to get all my gear. And now it was time to move to the next step, which was finding a place to go. I used the All Trails app on my phone to locate locations near me. After about a few weeks of looking for the right spot, I found the Kimmel Lookout along the Appalachian Trail. Using the All Trails app, I was able to find specific locations along the way. For example, I found a reservoir, a campsite, and a boulder field to go out and discover. Being able to have an idea of where to go and how far away things were was really helpful. And it really helped me calm my nerves because I didn't really know where I was going. With all my gear lined up and a location found, my next step was to find a date. Finding a date was no easy task. My original plan was to go out for 3 days and 2 nights, but finding time for this was next to impossible. With a lacrosse game and practice almost every weekend, I had to change the date around a few times. Finally, I figured out that Easter break would work very well, but I was only able to do a 2-day, 1-night trip. I reached out to some friends to ask if they wanted to join me, and they said yes. Getting this step done was the last major step I needed, and from this point on, everything fell into place. With about a week and a half before the trip, I reached out to my friend Dan Jordan again and asked him if he was able to run me through how to use some of the gear. I went over to his house and we sat down, and I watched as he went over how to use a butane stove and how to pitch a tent. At this point in my project, I had a pretty good idea of how everything worked, but seeing it in person really helped boost my confidence and get me ready for the test run. One important thing that I learned while going through this process is that a lot of this stuff is actually very easy to use. Going into this project, I thought you needed years of training, and in reality, with a few hours of hard practice, you can get everything under control. So, my gear was ready, location was set, and the weekend was picked out. Now it's time for the fun part. My friends and I were excited for the adventure. We left Bernathen around 10 o'clock, and after an important stop at Wawa, we got to the parking area at around 1 o'clock. The hike to the campground we picked was about 7 miles away. We gathered our gear and dove headfirst into the awesome trail ahead. The hike took us about 2.5 hours, and we kind of took our time, stopped for some water and snack breaks along the way. In the mid-afternoon, we got some rain, but it slowed down right when we got to the campsite. Good thing I had my trusty dusty jacket on that it kept me and my phone dry at all times. We set up our tents, made a fire, and enjoyed the night. In the morning, we went on a hike to the boulder field and enjoyed the sun coming up with some nice cups of coffee. All in all, this little 34-hour trip was a total blast, and for me, it opened up the world of the outdoors. Now I keep thinking of better and more challenging hikes to accomplish. With my test run complete, my next step in the process was to complete my service piece. Initially, my plan was to fix up a local cabin along the Appalachian Trail, but due to poor planning on my part, 2 snowstorms, and a lacrosse game every Saturday, I was not able to complete my first plan. But with the help of Tony, we were able to make another plan. There's an outdoor learning space beyond the elementary school back there that was long overdue for some maintenance. So we decided to clean it up for my service piece. We raked out the path, trimmed low-hanging vines and branches, created a new cut-through path, upgraded the common area by adding logs to sit on, and started to create a new altar. The feedback from the 8th graders was incredible. The goal of this piece was to create a spark of learning enthusiasm, and I think we were able to accomplish our goal. Right away, the 8th graders wanted to go out and work on the area and improve it. On May 7th, we had a Cinco de Mayo party, 2 days late, I might add, with around 40 people attending, including my Spanish class. We ate tacos and delicious churro ice cream, and we talked with the 8th graders. I was very excited to see that the work we did on the area had such a positive effect. Doing this portion helped me discover why I love the idea of backpacking and the outdoors for my project. In the beginning of the year, my motivation was to learn to backpack so I could do cooler, more advanced things down the road. But throughout the year, that changed. My new inspiration is expressing to others that the outdoors are available for everyone. And there are so many awesome locations near and far that anyone can discover. I came into the outdoor community as an outsider and was able to make friends along the way. The outdoor community is very welcoming, and if you ever need anything, people are always willing to lend a helping hand. Also, I came to realize that learning in the outdoors is a great way to get students excited and interested. The instant enthusiasm from the 8th graders shows this. Even at my age, when a teacher says we can go outside, the class suddenly gets more excited and engaged. For college next year, I'm attending the University of Vermont, where I will take part in the outdoor learning community. During my time up there, I plan to take advantage of the spectacular outdoors and blend it together with my schoolwork. The outdoors provide endless opportunities and adventures, whether it's a 3-week trip along the Pacific Crest, a day trip to the Delaware River Gap, or a morning walk along the Pennypack. I hope that everyone takes advantage of this spectacular earth. Thank you. Now for any questions?
So how many friends did you take with you? I thought you said you might want to go alone.
So the question is, how many friends did I bring? I brought 4 friends, and then including myself, 5 people.
And they all fit in the tent?
No, we brought our own tents. Yeah. This one's a little tight.
Would you like to go by yourself?
Yes, I would. In the summer, either I'm going to go out for a little trip by myself or with one of my good friends, Dan, who actually helped me gather my supplies. Yes.
You said that you've always been interested in backpacking and outdoorsy stuff beforehand, but you've never really had the time to really pursue it. Was there anything that sparked that in the very beginning, like a camping trip or something?
So the question is, I've always enjoyed it. What kind of sparked my idea for this project? In the summer, I built a cabin with my friends, in his backyard, and that was really fun. And that kind of rekindled my outdoor love, kind of. And then going into this project, I was like, I like doing that. I like the outdoors, and then it kind of just like worked together. So, yes.
Have you settled on sort of like your pinnacle? What's your top goal with backpacking? Like, you know, some mountain climbers have a certain peak they want to get to. Is there a park or a national park or something that you have your eyes on?
So the question is, what's my goal? Do I have like a pinnacle or something that a certain mountain that I want to accomplish or hike? For me, it's kind of just right now, just go and do everything. You know, go to Vermont, hike a smaller one there, and then my real goal, if I was being a little unrealistic, would be go out to Jackson Hole and do a hike there, because my good buddy went there and he said it was awesome. So I want to go out there, find a mountain there, and conquer that.
How come it took me coming to this presentation to learn about this?
So the question is, how did it take him coming to this presentation to learn about this? Maybe you could ask more. Thank you.
We are now going to have a brief intermission. You're welcome to enjoy snacks in the hallway right across from here through those double doors and through another double doors. We'll show you the way if you get lost. Our next speaker is coming to us all the way from the West Coast. Please give a warm welcome to Laurel Morgan.
I took senior project as a chance to pursue the world in which I hope to pursue a career. Ever since I was a little girl, I've wanted to be a nurse. I would wear old scrubs and lug around my mom's stethoscopes and dole out a cure to any malady my sister would happen to come up with that day. I actually just gave her Smarties, nobody tell her. I'm incredibly blessed to have grown up in a family full of nurses, and I aspire to be just like my mom and grandmas, compassionate, resourceful, and tough. Growing up visiting my mom at work, it was clear to me that I belonged in the medical field. As I got older, it also became clear that there, at Oregon Health and Science University, the educated and plentiful staff had everything under control. Through talking to my grandma, Peggy Andrews, my eyes were opened to the fact that, unlike here in the US, hospitals and communities around the world are sinking under the weight of an overworked, undereducated, or simply non-existent medical staff and inadequate supplies. To me, this fact is inexcusable. During the summer before my senior year, I spent a lot of time brainstorming possible projects, talking with my grandma, and figuring out which public health issues I feel most passionate about. As it turns out, each different issue left me feeling the same way. Angry and astounded at the inconsistencies in the value of a human life around the world. My grandma told me about her experiences in Haiti, where she witnessed just how differently people see women, children, and those with disabilities. She said that one newborn who had breathed in amniotic fluid into her lungs upon birth was just shrugged off, expected to die. My grandma has never been one to give up, and her team helped the baby to recover and live. While this particular story has a very happy ending, it is incredibly common for newborns to die of similar preventable complications. In Haiti and similar places, handicapped kids are just shrugged off. They're cast aside. I heard countless similar stories, but overall, the thing that frustrated me the most was the fact that so many people suffer from illnesses that are preventable and treatable, but die because they don't have access to proper medical care or even clean water. Here we have the ability to fly cameras around in the sky and video chat across continents. So why on earth are so many people dying from dehydration or childbirth? I started off the year all fired up, feeling like I could change the world in just 9 months. I've always been one to do anything I set my mind to, but the issues I now wanted to tackle were way bigger than me. My plan was to organize a trip to Guatemala, where I would shadow and volunteer in an emergency room and public health clinic after graduation. I dedicated myself to the planning and preparation for this trip. I researched places to stay in Guatemala, transportation options, practiced my Spanish, applied for funding, and educated myself on the issues surrounding public health in Guatemala through my research paper. My paper dug into the specific issues surrounding public health in the majority world, which I would need to understand in order to develop a useful and relevant project. The knowledge I gained from researching and writing my paper was a huge part of my preparation, and I went into the planning stages confident that I had an understanding of the issues which I wanted to address with my senior project. For several weeks, I was in correspondence with 3 organizations, all with wonderful causes, but I kept running into dead ends. As it turns out, busy organizations don't always take 18-year-old girls with big dreams very seriously. During this stage, I learned the true value of communication, and more importantly, an understanding that all I could control was my side of the conversation. I would get nervous every time I was about to send an email, and was proud when I finally stopped sharing them with my mom to proofread before hitting send. I don't know why I was so worried about sending emails. After all, I've never been shy, and it was really the response to the email I needed to worry about. Finally, I came into contact with Dr. Jenny Leslie, a woman who used to work with my mom at OHSU. She gave me advice about the type of project I wanted to create and put me in direct contact with the volunteer coordinator at Hospitalito de Atitlan in Guatemala. Hospitalito would be perfect for my project and had facilitated similar volunteer work and projects before. From what I gained from Dr. Leslie, I would be spending time in the waiting room of the clinic, getting information from patients about their medical history and current reason for visiting. I went through my routine of composing an email, freaking out, proofreading, editing, and finally, I was ready to hit send. The pressure of, this is it, was really getting to me until Mr. Boyce kindly reminded that, hey, the worst they can really do is say no. So, after 2 weeks, my project hanging in the balance with my hopes high, that's exactly what they did. The email read, Estimado Laura, gracias por tu comunicación. Realmente hemos trabajado con varios voluntarios en el área médica, pero ahora únicamente necesitamos enfermeras que están en la universidad o del estudiante de enfermera. The email explained that Hospitalito is currently only accepting volunteers that are already in college or nursing school. As you can imagine, this was a huge blow to my project and my confidence in it. At this point in the year, right before spring break, it was too late to find another place to go. While I was hugely disappointed, it was clear my project was not over. Looking back, I realized that I was naive to think that I, a high school student with no experience working in the medical field, could change the world of public health issues with just a senior project. And for a while, I really struggled with the fact at what it seemed like 6 months of research, planning, and preparation had led to nothing. In truth, however, I hadn't lost any of the knowledge gained through my preparations for senior project. I was definitely frustrated by the fact that I couldn't take action right then and right there in the specific way that I wanted in the beginning of the year. But I realized that at that point in my life, I wasn't the best person to be hopping on an airplane, flying off to Guatemala to lend my helping hand in a hospital. All I understood was how I felt and why I wanted to make changes, but not how to do it. For the rest of the year, I decided to continue on the path of preparation, but in a broader sense, by finding out how other people use their careers in nursing to benefit public health, both locally and globally. I began a long email correspondence with Bonnie Mcclellan, a nurse from Portland, Oregon, who has volunteered her medical skills to countless communities around the world. Originally, Bonnie and I were going to talk on the phone, but she mentioned that she often had a hard time talking about her experiences without her throat closing up. I couldn't imagine what sorts of things that were actually too difficult to speak about until I read Bonnie's responses to my emailed questions. Sitting in Be Well, my heart broke as I read about her experiences in Bolivia, Kenya, and South Sudan. To give an idea, here's one of Bonnie's stories. I worked with a nurse in the Nyanza province of Kenya. I'm quite jealous of nurses in developing countries because their scope of practice is much larger than my own. They deliver babies and suture wounds and diagnose and treat basic problems. Late one night, a young woman was brought in by her family. She was bleeding heavily after a miscarriage, and her husband didn't come in until much later. The young woman was a fourth wife and had very low status. We decided she needed to go to the hospital for care, and the hospital was about 20 miles away. Transportation and care would cost 1,000 shillings, which is about $12, and about 2 days' work for a farm worker. The husband's response? It's cheaper to get another wife. Bonnie ended up paying for the woman's hospital stay, along with meals for the woman's husband. But her story left me astounded, eager, and angry. I wanted to know the best ways to start working against this type of injustice. Bonnie's advice to me was to develop a skill that will benefit the people. Emergency, obstetrician, pediatric, and operating room nursing skills are needed everywhere. She also told me that if I can understand my own motivation, it will change my entire experience, and then I might end up learning more than I teach. Through Senior Project, I've already experienced just that. When I set out to share my knowledge and be useful, I often end up learning more about myself and others than what I had to teach in the first place. As for the practical portion of Bonnie's advice, I will be starting my nursing prerequisites in Portland this fall, and I will be applying in 2 years from now to Oregon Health and Science University, the same place that sparked this all back in my childhood. Another childhood experience in particular led me to the creation of the service piece of my project. When I was 13, my Aunt Fran had an unconventional birthday celebration and brought my entire family to volunteer at the Ronald McDonald House in Portland. Ronald McDonald Houses provide comfortable places for families to stay, have meals, and call home while their children are receiving care in a hospital. When I finally realized how perfect this opportunity would be, I couldn't believe that I hadn't thought of it before. I got my East Coast family on board, and we prepared, cooked, and served a delicious meal of lasagna, green beans, Caesar salad, garlic bread, and a ton of chocolate chip cookies. The most meaningful part of the evening by far was eating dinner with the families. We sat at the table with a woman whose son was born with cerebral palsy and had been in St. Christopher's for 2 weeks for a gallbladder surgery. This woman was raising her son and daughter on her own and had lost her oldest son last year to an overdose. Every single family in the Ronald McDonald House has a similar story and faces similar hardships. Their stories made my group anxious to return. My project as a whole lends itself to feeling a little bit intangible, but my service piece is something concrete that I'm very proud of and I will never forget. Just like how I grew between the visits to the Ronald McDonald House, I've grown immensely as a student and a human through the course of Senior Project. I've especially benefited due to the connections I have made with adults and fellow classmates. One relationship in particular that has added an extra element of stability and grounding to my project has been my relationship with my mentor, Mcclellan. One of the things I appreciate most about our relationship is the mutual respect between us. At first, I was very hesitant to have a mentor because I wanted my project, whatever it was going to be entirely my own. I also wanted to be the one holding myself accountable for this amount of work. Mrs. Allen did a wonderful job of helping me organize my thoughts and keeping my head from popping straight off. I could always count on Mrs. Allen to be a solid source of advice and help me figure out the path in which I wanted my project to take. Although our scheduled meetings are over, I know I will always have a friend in Mrs. Allen. Going into Senior Project, I had big and unrealistic dreams about changing the world. While I've learned that I can't change things in less than 9 months, I've also learned that having largely unrealistic dreams is not a bad thing because it pushes me to work hard and strive for the best that I can accomplish. If I hadn't started off this year with a big idea, I would never be where I am now. My project has taught me countless valuable lessons about myself and the world around me. I think the most important thing I've learned is that persistence and patience are both essential, but must be balanced very delicately. I'm also proud of my perseverance throughout my project, despite the various roadblocks. And I've come to understand that I'll be proud of anything I work hard for, regardless of the outcome or appearance. I've also realized that emailing is not as scary as it seems, but a little dose of fear makes for a very grown-up sounding email. Every skill that I've acquired will be put to good use as I move into nursing school and beyond. When it comes time to take my nursing career out into the world and strive to make other healthcare systems as helpful and healing as what I've witnessed, I'll be glad to have all of the connections I've made throughout the year. My project, though not exactly how I imagined, is not a failure, simply the first step to something great. A dedication to the improvement of global healthcare and connecting with people through a career in nursing. This is just the beginning. Gotta stay up here. Can't leave yet. Any questions? Emily?
Do you plan on contacting the hospital again in Guatemala when you are in nursing school?
Yes, her question was, do I plan on contacting the hospital in Guatemala once I'm done nursing school? And I do plan to contact them along with the other couple organizations that I was talking with in the beginning. I'm not sure if I will end up going there, but I think it's a great opportunity, for sure. Thank you. Anybody? Leb?
When did you know you wanted to become a nurse?
Ooh. Well, I've always known that I wanted to be a nurse. Oh, sorry, her question was, when did you find out you wanted to be a nurse? I think I've always known. My mom and grandmas are pretty darn cool, so I wanted to be just like them. And I thought the little stethoscope with the ear thing, I really was fascinated by that. So I wanted to, if I could be around stethoscopes, then I guess it's pretty much my dream job. Oh, Mrs. Shadig?
Have you made a decision about which of those 4 branches of nursing you want to go into?
I would love to go into pediatric nursing. Luckily, I spent a little bit of time there when my friend Libby visited me this summer and got appendicitis. I mean, it was really unfortunate for Lib, but I loved it because I could. Sorry. I had a great time. I could just, talk to the nurses about whatever, and they were very helpful. One of them actually did her prerequisites at the college that I'm going to this fall, so it was really exciting. So I think pediatric, depending, I don't know, I guess we'll have to see. Thank you. Anybody else?
We are now going to have another brief intermission. Please do not bring any refreshments back into the auditorium. And if you want to look at their portfolios or mission statements, they're right on that table. Welcome back. I hope you had a great intermission. We are now, you can't hear me? I don't know what to do about that, sorry. Okay. I'm now going to introduce Ellie Taylor, who's going to talk to us about her performing passion.
Have you ever had a light bulb moment? A revelation that changed the course of your life? I know I certainly did, about 2 years ago. I was in the car with my piano teacher, Miss Sandra Carlock, on the way back from a concert we had attended earlier that evening. The 3 students who performed were just a couple years older than me, and you could tell from the way they played just how much they loved their music, and their enthusiasm was absolutely contagious. As I sat in the car, thinking about the wonderful concert I'd just seen, I turned to Miss Carlock and I said, "Do you think that I could ever play piano professionally?" And she simply replied, "Yes, Ellie, of course you can." I have loved music for as long as I can remember. Coming from the Taylor family definitely helped with this. Many of my relatives are musicians, so music has been a familiar presence in my life since I was very young. I started taking piano lessons from my aunt, Marat Genslinger, when I was 8 years old, and I have been playing ever since. Sometimes I dreamed that I would grow up and become a professional musician, but I always dismissed the idea as far-fetched or unrealistic. I just never thought I would be good enough. Even once I started studying at Settlement Music School with Miss Carlock, I still didn't see this as a real possibility. It wasn't until the end of my sophomore year that things began to change. I decided over the past summer that I do want to pursue music, both in college and beyond. I wanted to do something with my senior project that would bring me closer to this goal and help me to immerse myself in music, so I chose to prepare a full piano recital. I learned 6 classical piano pieces and performed them at my recital, which was last night. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, what's the big deal? This girl has been playing piano for 10 years, and she just learned some more pieces and is calling it a project? But before I lose you, I need you to know that there is so much work that goes into preparing a program like that. The program included works such as a Bach Prelude and Fugue, a 3-movement Beethoven Sonata, which was, by the way, 25 minutes just on its own, and Chopin's Barcarolle, among other things. Several of these pieces are much more advanced than anything I had learned before, so I was definitely setting myself up for quite a challenge. On top of that, this was my very first time performing a full recital by myself. My previous experience consisted of performing just 1 or 2 pieces at a time, but my recital last night was 1 hour and 15 minutes long, and I performed the whole thing from memory. Maybe the most obvious requirement for preparing a recital is practice, and practice, and even more practice. Ooh, excuse me. I had to boost my daily practice schedule up to 3 hours every day. If you are at all familiar with the average lifestyle of an A&C student, you will know that finding 3 extra hours every day is no easy task. Before senior year, I did not practice nearly this much. On a good day, maybe I could squeeze in 2 hours, but it wasn't at all as consistent as I would hope for it to be. And I had to make a great deal of sacrifice to change that this year. I wanted to stick to my priorities and make as much progress as I possibly could. Despite the struggles of time management and living a very, very busy life, I have devoted nearly 400 hours toward my project since January. Now, you may be wondering what I actually do with all of these hours that I spend at the piano. There are some key steps to follow when learning a new piece of music. And the first one is to learn all the notes. This involves a good deal of detailed work and can become a painstakingly slow process in the more difficult passages in a piece. In order to play each section without any tension in my hands and wrists, I needed to work on my technique very carefully during the early phases. Often I had to mark up my score very heavily and even write down specifically which finger I was going to use for the notes, because the music was just so complex that I really had to. After figuring out how to play the notes, I could go on to increase the tempo and then play something like this. In what I just played, but that doesn't mean that it's performance ready. It's still missing the expressive qualities that it needs to actually convey something to the audience. It needs shape and direction, and it's my job to make sure that the audience comes along for the ride. Compare that, what I just played, to something a little bit more like this. Melody is clear, and the music actually has shape to it. And it really means something now that I've added the melody and the shaping that I need. And this is the difference between learning a bunch of notes and really creating music. These are just some of the principles I followed while learning a new piece. Every time I sat down at the piano, I made it my goal to make what I was doing a little bit more beautiful and sound more natural to listen to. I quickly found that practicing more doesn't really cut it. I wasn't making the kind of progress I wanted to, and I realized I would need to change my approach to practice as well. Good practice requires focus and discipline, and developing these skills was one of the major challenges that I faced during senior project. I had to learn how to listen very closely to what I was playing and analyze the kind of sound I was producing and the way the phrase flowed, and compare that to what I intended to play. I began to make my practice sessions a much more active and efficient process by implementing some of these skills, and little by little, things began to improve. I am so very grateful that I had a mentor like Miss Sandra Carlock, my piano teacher, to help me through this entire process. Through my weekly lessons at Settlement Music School and many late-night phone calls, she was always there to offer invaluable guidance and encouragement in all of my endeavors. Miss Carlock is an incredibly supportive teacher, and I know she believed in me even when I really didn't. Most importantly, she held me accountable to do my very best and helped me through each of the challenges that I faced along the way. For the service piece of my project, I participated in Settlement Music School's annual fundraiser, which is called Spring for Settlement. The fundraiser is designed to raise money through charitable donations to provide next year's students with the financial aid they need in order to study at the school. Essentially, the money gives students a musical education that they might not be able to afford otherwise. After studying at Settlement for 6 years, I really wanted to give back and help other students have the same opportunity that I had received. Preparing a senior recital has helped me to learn the values of discipline and focus. Owning these skills while working on my music was deeply rewarding, and I found that the more I worked, the more I loved what I was doing. My favorite part of every school day was coming down to the auditorium and practicing on that piano right over there during senior project class. It felt like a break from all of the hustle and bustle, and I really loved having the time to do what I care about the most. Senior project truly has been a journey in self-discovery, and it is an irreplaceable experience. Embracing music in a new way has helped me to figure out who I really am and find the confidence to perform the music that I love so much. Last night at my recital, I was able to put everything that I've learned into practice, and I cannot express just how happy I was with the result. Even though I ran into some memory slips during the first couple of pieces, I just kept on going, and I wouldn't let that stop me, and I really fought against the performance anxiety that I was feeling. By the time that I got to the third movement of the Beethoven Sonata, I thought to myself, why not just have some fun with it and stop worrying about all of these tiny details? And that's exactly what I did. So during the second half of the program, I really was able to play my heart out, and I think everything that I played during the second half was better than I'd ever played it before, so I was very happy about that. With the new skills and understanding of music that I have gained this year, I feel that I really can become a professional musician, and I'm grateful that I could take my first steps toward this in senior project class. Now, I would like to play Edward McDowell's Concert Etude, which was the very last piece on my program last night. Any questions? All right, yes?
Where did you do your 3 hours of practice?
All right, the question was, where did I do my 3 hours of practice? So basically, since January, I've had about an hour's worth of time in class, in senior project class every day at school, to come down here and practice. So I'd do about an hour here, and then I'd go home after school and do my other 2 hours at my house. Thank you. Nora?
Can you describe your ultimate goal position that you'd like to be in as a professional musician? Because there are so many different places that you could go with that. So what would be your perfect one?
Okay. The question is, what would be my end goal as a professional musician? And I want to be a concert pianist. That's the dream. And so I want to do solo work, and also I would like to do chamber work as well, which is performing in small groups like a trio or something like that. And also teaching, because I have found that I also really enjoy that. So, thank you. All right, question?
When you're in a chamber group or a trio, in your example, the piano is not an accompanist, it's a participant in the trio?
I'm so happy you asked that. Okay. The question was, if you're playing in a chamber group like a trio, is the pianist the accompanist or part of the trio? And the answer is that I'm one of the members. I'm not just the accompaniment. The piano is often very involved with what's going on and contributes melodic parts as well as chords, and the other instruments will do the same thing. So it's a lot of exchange between the instruments in the group. Yeah, but very good question. Thank you. And
What other instruments has music been written for piano as one of the trio members? What other instruments?
The question was, what other instruments are typically in a piano trio? And normally it's a piano, violin, and cello. That's kind of the typical arrangement. But you can also have piano, cello, and clarinet. That's been done before. So there are tons of varieties with that. Thank you. Makayla?
How do you plan on continuing your journey next year?
The question is, how do I plan on continuing my journey next year? And I will actually be taking a gap year to focus on music. I made the decision to become a music major a lot later than most people do. As I said earlier, I decided this past summer. And my teacher and I decided that it would be nice to have more time to really prepare audition material and feel more ready before jumping into that, just to have more time. So I'll be doing a gap year to focus on music, prepare for college auditions, and all of that stuff. I'll continue to learn at Settlement. Thank you. All right, last question.
What was the hardest part of the whole project for you?
The question is, what was the hardest part of the whole project? Oh, that's a good question. I think it was adjusting to the kind of work that I would have to be doing, because I've never prepared a full recital before, and it's very different getting a bunch of pieces ready at one time versus just one or two. So I had to learn how to learn all 6 pieces on the program while maintaining the older stuff that I'd already learned to keep that performance ready at the same time. So I would have to divvy up my time really carefully and practice my older pieces every 3 days slowly just to make sure everything was okay and all of that stuff. And that was something that was completely new to me, so that became difficult. And that and just really focusing on what I was doing became pretty tricky, but it was definitely worth it. I loved all of it. Thank you.
We are going to have one more intermission. Again, you are invited to enjoy snacks or to look at the portfolios and mission statements. And please do not bring snacks back into the auditorium. Thank you. They're up there. Oh, yeah, nice. Okay, our final speaker is coming to us from rural Missouri. So give a warm welcome to Makayla Clippin Stine.
Calling cattle in Bernathen, Pennsylvania, utter nonsense. I experienced quite a culture shock when I decided to come to the Academy of the New Church for my senior year. I found myself in a place where naming breeds of cattle was pointless, drive your tractor to school day was laughable, and the boys don't wear cowboy boots and flannels, even outside of school. What? At first, this was trivial. I mean, does it really matter that there's only one country radio station instead of 10? But that was before the homesickness settled in. It's a familiar first-year feeling in any new place, especially here. You settle in as much as possible with the A&C monster of activities flurrying around you, and you notice things from home and your roots that you are missing. Thank goodness for Senior Project, though, because I received the opportunity to bring a little bit of home out here with me. Growing up, I have always been around agriculture and cattle, and thoroughly appreciate the efforts that go into making food. From the glass bottle dairy a few miles down the road, to the barn right next door that kept our future hamburgers warm in the winter, I pretty much had thorough exposure to the processes that provided people in my county and hundreds of others with the food that is all too easy to take for granted. I was quite shocked when, in doing my research and talking to my fellow peers, I found that not only are these industries and processes taken for granted, but they are a hot topic of debate and attacks from people who don't understand or see the beauty and the livelihood of agriculture. It was after this realization that I made the goal of my project to clear out the misconceptions of agricultural industries, especially those of beef and dairy with which I am most familiar. I began with a research paper that surrounded the topics of industry misconceptions and the means to clear them. My research involved consulting organizations such as People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the Humane Society, and nutritional studies such as the China study to pinpoint the negativity surrounding beef. I then looked to the American Cattlemen's Association, the North American Meat Institute, and various medical journals for counter-arguments. Beyond that, I called and interviewed cattle farmers from my home county in DeKalb County to ask them about their specific farming practices. It was through this connection to the farmers and other people along my entire senior project journey that I felt the most excitement. On the senior class Washington, D.C. trip, I was able to contact the United States Department of Agriculture and set up a tour of the facilities. I was even able to meet with the Secretary's head advisor to discuss agricultural problems that are current in today's world. It probably didn't hurt that he is my uncle, Brian Klippenstein. The tour really lit a fire inside me to dedicate more to my project. By the time the real project half of the year rolled around, I decided that I was going to host an agricultural fair with exhibits on agricultural misconceptions. School nurse Crystal Smith offered her expertise in event planning and catering to me as my mentor throughout the process. My first hurdle was fundraising for the exhibit material and food that I hoped to serve. Nurse Crystal suggested that rather than asking for free will donations, I should provide a service to people so that they would be more willing to pay. Specifically, she suggested that I use my baking experience to sell bread to folks in the community. I had an ideal goal of 25 orders to fill and started my advertising. This in itself was a tall order, because when I said baking experience, that was a slight exaggeration. Sure, I've made the occasional batch of bread, cake, cookies, but never in a million years did I think I'd have to fill 59 orders in the one weekend I had in the Bernathen Society kitchen. I had an overwhelming number of classmates come help me with this endeavor and was very grateful for all of their support. To fit the baking session into hectic ANC life, I would make several batches and let them rise while I was at an event and come back later to bake them. Well, this idea went horribly wrong on my second run-through because I got locked out of the society building with 28 loaves of my bread rising inside. By the time I was able to get into the building the next morning, they had all fermented, and I had to throw them all away. Brutal, considering that orders were supposed to be filled that afternoon. However, the week after spring break, I was able to complete the 28 orders and even sent one to a relative in Montana. I am able to look back on the hectic travesty and laugh good-naturedly now, but I can tell you, I was not laughing then. I continued and completed my fundraising journey with a dress-down day during which ANC students could wear green or flannels in the name of agriculture. Not only did I make a little bit of extra money for my fare, but I finally got to see boys who can wear jeans and flannels. I continued and completed my fundraising journey. While this process was finishing up, I was moving on to the next piece of planning with my service piece and event. This is when things started to really get a bit hairy for me and my journey. Over the progression of the school year, my background has gradually landed me in conflict with some of my classmates. As a conservative from Middle America, my views have often been challenged and met with a certain level of disdain. I spent 17 years of my life around people who, while still having multiple opinions, tended to come from a very Christian, very conservative background. It is difficult to come from that and then be around people who not only disagree with your opinion, but who seem to discount your thoughts of their worth and treat them as naive and ignorant, whether this was intentional or not. This was interesting coming from the people who claim to be some of the most tolerant and open-minded people out there. With a senior project that had a goal of sharing my background, I felt pretty beat down by this and set out to learn how to avoid it. I learned a lot about how to carry my worldviews from this experience. I also discovered that in my current situation, the best way to handle myself was to be silent, know my values, and stick to them with my choices and avoid discussion. This scared me in the context of my project and kind of burnt out the zealous pride I had in my roots and my ability to share them. That's when it hit me. Our goals as human beings with our experiences should never be to change someone else's mind. The vast amount of diversity in the world was created so that we could enrich each other's lives and provide infinite amounts of lessons to learn. My overall view of my project shifted, and my goal stopped being changing people's minds. My new goal was to plant seeds and spark conversation. After all, a crop that is well nurtured and tended to yields way more than a crop that is manipulated and forced to grow. From there, I completed my service piece of teaching an agriculture-related class to 2 BACS classrooms. As you can see, I was a little overexcited. I ended up teaching 2 groups of 4th graders with supplementary materials from Missouri Farm Bureau Educational Outreach. I passed out dairy and beef ag mags to the class and opened with the offering of a snack. They could choose between grass or beef jerky. Of course, the grass was a poor option and one that human beings cannot truly digest. I explained to the class that that was cattle's purpose on Earth. They can create a delicious, protein-packed snack with their ruminant stomachs out of the abundance of grass that they eat. I gave the students a nutritional background on beef, discussing heme iron and muscle-building protein. After the discussion, I also provided popcorn for the vegan and vegetarian students in my audience. The main event was teaching the students how to milk cows with rubber gloves and water. I had students partner up and gave them each a rubber glove that I had poked holes into the bottom of and had them fill with water. I then went around and showed them the proper technique for milking cows and showed them what a painstaking process it was to get all of the water out of the glove. I then asked them to imagine doing this to about 30 cows, and at 4 o'clock in the morning before the sun had even risen. It kind of made them stop and think a little bit about the milk that they get to drink every day. This setup was similar to a more realistic setup I eventually had at my fair. The students enjoyed the presentation and even expressed interest in attending my senior project event. The fair itself was even more of a success. I had multiple hilarious competitions, including pie eating, post driving, fencing, cow milking, and hay bale stacking. I also had free samples of hamburger and dairy products from Missouri. The food was brought via truck by my parents and totaled 21 pounds of hamburger, 10 gallons of milk, and 8 pounds of cheese, 1,089 miles from Maysville, Missouri. I also had sheep, dwarf dairy goats, and chickens from Greg Jackson on display for petting and feeding. I heard many ag-related questions that day and sparked conversations that made the entire day worth it. I also recognized that agriculture aside, I was still providing a use that made the day a success. Seeing the smiles and laughter of my peers and community members over activities that come from my home absolutely warmed my heart. I was able to share my roots and loves with others for just a little while. I think I even got a few of them to consider visiting the flyover state that is Missouri. I learned that changing people's opinions should never be the goal. Never lose your passion about what you care about, but keep the big picture in mind. I hope that in the future, I will be able to be useful in sharing the Lord's love in similar manners. As I ended my final blog post, thank you to everyone who has helped me along this journey and guided me to find the beauty in the ornately complicated journey that is Senior Project. Are there any questions? Yes, sir?
You talked about misconceptions, and I'm guessing they would fall into two categories, one having to do with treatment of animals and the other one having to do with nutrition. Can you tell me what you think the biggest misconception is with regard to nutrition?
The question was, can you tell me what you think the biggest misconception about nutrition is? And I think the biggest misconception is that beef causes heart disease and the fat in beef is unhealthy for human beings. But scientific studies have shown that that's just not so. And you don't have to have beef in your diet, but it does certainly help, and it provides you with more protein than almost any other source that there is on the planet. Yes, ma'am? The question was, what do I want to be when I grow up? Well, I considered going into an agriculture or science field. I toured a couple of colleges in Kansas and Oklahoma, but I ultimately have decided that I want to go into medicine and will be attending Bernathen College for pre-med next year. Yes, ma'am?
What was your favorite part about the bread experience?
The question was, what was my favorite part about the bread experience? There was so much. Being at the society kitchen was fun because I had a couple of classmates come in very randomly and help me in the most random ways. And I had so much overwhelming support from people when it went horribly wrong. I felt so loved and supported by my classmates, and I think that's what was the most fun for me.
Thank you so much for coming to tonight's presentations. I warmly welcome you to return on May 22nd to hear speeches from Nora Connolly, Ben Harris, Paul, can't say his last name, and myself. And here's some portfolios and mission statements for you to look at if you haven't already. Have a great night. Get home safe.